Let's talk about intelligence. Let's face it, we are fascinated by the genius rule breakers, not even necessarily the role model nerds. I'm talking about people like Sean Parker, the guy who founded Napster at age 19. The file sharing service was one of the fastest growing companies. Parker got into computer programming at age 7, got arrested for hacking into networks of major companies as a teenager, and was offered to work for the CIA, which he turned down. He became Facebook's first president at 24 and successfully invested millions in Spotify. Today he's a household name. According to estimates, the genius internet entrepreneur is worth $3 billion. I didn't find reliable data on his IQ, but it's very likely north of 140, most probably higher. First of all, let me give you context on what intelligence even is. Right after that, we're going to cover the specific IQ levels and the most common jobs for people at the different levels. To spice things up even more, we're going to use the IQs of each level to show how feasible working competitive careers at McKinsey or Goldman Sachs is. Intelligence is a big word, and the complexity of the human brain is fairly remarkable. Intelligence is the ability and mental capacity to reason, learn, understand, and judge. That includes abstract thinking and problem solving, as well as the speed of information processing. We have to be clear what type of intelligence we are referring to, though. What's even the link between intelligence and IQ? The theory? There's an underlying baseline of intelligence we all have. Since it's an overall type of intelligence, let's call it general intelligence as a measure of mental ability. The factor to measure it is therefore called the G factor. This widely known model is called the two-factor model and comes from the British psychologist Charles Spearman. According to his theory, the specific mental abilities that you may have in various fields from science to language and music are all rooted in that general intelligence. And this is the intelligence most standardized IQ tests test you for. IQ scores claim to reflect your broader mental abilities in one number. And that's one of the issues with IQ as a score for intelligence. It's the fact that it's difficult to define absolute mental ability by linking it to one exact number. In other words, let's say you have an IQ of 100 and your friend has an IQ of 107. Does it mean your friend is more capable and better in anything? Of course not, and given how complex intelligence is, the difference of 100 versus 107 isn't even big enough to predict life success overall. Comparing a person with an average IQ of 100 to someone like Jordan Peterson with a 150 IQ makes a big difference. The latter person is very likely faster when it comes to information processing and picking up complex concepts. Jordan Peterson's academic track record is a good example. We can agree that IQ provides a rough indication of cognitive ability in certain areas, and therefore it is indeed interesting to look how different IQ ranges affect people's lives, including yours. By the way, there were so many ideas and models on intelligence. Some scientists believe that mostly head and brain size determine how intelligent a person is. Things changed over time, and in 1904, a French psychologist called Alfred Binet came up with a very reasonable idea. He wanted to determine the mental ability of kids in relation to their peer group, because it would show early on whether some kids may need stronger or different support in their development. His test was eventually revised by Stanford University, and that's how we ended up with one of the most common tests today, the Stanford Binet IQ test. Enough theories, let's cut to the chase with level 1, intellectual disability. This first level can be problematic because it's a functional problem and we can barely solve it. We're talking about the category of intellectual disability, formerly known as mental retardation. At this level, most people have an IQ between 50 and 69, classifying them as mildly impaired. Imagine yourself as someone with a very low IQ. You can have casual conversations, but you won't be able to derive much value from abstract concepts, nor understand them. The same goes for your moral understanding. Your ability to judge, draw conclusions, or solve problems is severely limited. At the low end of the scale, it's just like a child. You probably know when you've done something wrong, you don't really understand why or what it is that is wrong though. The difference between your mental retardation and the child, however, is potential and perspective. While you remain limited, the child will develop and outgrow its deficiencies. People at this first level are more vulnerable to the risks that the impairment comes with. Comprehending social interaction and being able to apply behavior that matches the context may suffer. How do you emotionally respond to certain situations, and how to engage in any conversation of a more complex nature? Probably not at all, because you aren't able to build a logical argument and wouldn't be able to have a discussion based on logical or analytical reasoning. Even maintaining friendships can be a struggle. Imagine social games that require a certain set of rules and strategies to follow. You will have a hard time to keep up with that, and your friends have to be patient with you, explaining things a few times and guiding you to include you. Your chances to successfully pursue higher education are low, because you will struggle to understand scientific literature and process large amounts of theoretical input. The learning process itself is your limitation. STEM field careers and working for McKinsey or Goldman Sachs aren't yet relevant to discuss at this level. The daily life is challenging enough for you. You may not be fully able to live independently, organize your life, and manage yourself without additional support, for example, social support. At this point, you struggle to keep up with the system overall. You would love to give it a try, but your circumstances aren't in your favor, so you fall behind and under the radar. And so far, it's very difficult to solve this problem. In a world that seems to be shifting heavily towards a small number of highly intelligent people driving the system, how do we go about those left behind? The current approach is to identify any specific needs that the person may have and then address those by social support, family support, etc. As for work, there are fortunately more initiatives to support and guide those with mental impairment, so they could eventually try jobs like backpacking at grocery stores. By the way, these below average IQ levels and problems aren't meant to put anyone into a box or stigmatize them. But in a fast-paced, intellectually competitive world, it's important to understand that some people struggle in a way that, ironically, you don't even understand. They need more support, require more patience, and certainly they all deserve kindness. Level 2, the learning disability. This second level is a challenging but very interesting one. I wanted to make sure to get an understanding of what living with a below average IQ is like. So I tried to find threads and posts on Reddit and Quora. And I found a few users who had tested IQ scores of 75 to 85, and they shared their perspective. This level of below average IQ is also known as borderline intellectual functioning, or even learning disability. The interesting part is the fact that the key struggle for people in this category is finding the right spot to fit in. They can take care of themselves and are able to live fairly independently. And yet, people with an IQ of 70 to 84 strongly feel the social and psychological effects of having a below average IQ. It's not so easy to deal with that. Besides the functional limitations, they also have to some degree. This can be an incredibly frustrating position to be in, because your IQ is high enough to understand your limitations, but not high enough to keep up with the complexity and adjust to changing environments as much as you would like. Using our McKinsey and Goldman Sachs equivalent, you still won't make it. Even though you could attend college in general, if you range at the high end of this level and have the right support, you won't achieve the academic excellence that these firms demand. As for the work at McKinsey or Goldman Sachs, the pace is way too fast and the complexity too high for you. Literally, the contract and compliance onboarding on day one will overwhelm you. And we aren't even talking about the case studies and interview rounds beforehand. Coming back to the Reddit and Quora users are research, those who claim to have an IQ of 75 or 80 struggle due to prejudice and social biases. It's actually worse, because the bias towards having a low IQ seems to cause problems that the mere IQ score wouldn't even cause. These people said they don't feel worthy, feel like losers, and some of them even wish they weren't born at all. And this shows the problem we have with labeling people by test score performance. Either you struggle and fall behind because you can't keep up with life's requirements, Or your below average IQ score makes you doubt your abilities. Even if it doesn't matter that much, it bothers you, and you fall for the trap of believing your IQ number will affect your life and career like nothing else. But it won't affect you as much as you may think, because success in life and career depends on a variety of factors besides IQ. That includes work ethic and conscientiousness. Coming back to the below average IQ, besides functional limits to some degree, the social aspect seems to be the one that affects people the most. Because whatever concept a person is being confronted with by society, they consciously or subconsciously pick it up, and it becomes part of their self-concept. The best example was a user who apparently scored a 116 IQ as a kid, only to find out much later that he actually scored an IQ of 85. The fact that he never knew helped him to be safe from prejudice and his own judgment. He didn't end up as a computer scientist or strategy consultant, but was doing good, working a fairly regular job. At this level, working positions that require decision making aren't suitable, since you may struggle with taking any decisions. Suitable tasks are repetitive and rather simple. With an IQ under 80, you will need thorough explanations and clear instructions to follow. At times you will get easily confused and overwhelmed. Some of the people who got a tested IQ of 75 to 80 claimed to lack intellectual curiosity and struggle to follow logic to some degree. Successfully attending, let alone graduating in STEM fields is very unlikely. Attending college in general is worth a try, but it won't be easy and will require lots of patience and dedication. Regular employment is certainly doable for you, but you need proper guidance and routines in place. Jobs in assembly, service jobs, and manual work are manageable for you if you range at the upper end. For an IQ like 75, it's not easy to find a suitable job at all. But compared to the first level of retardation, you can now at least take care of yourself and live fairly independently. Even strive to improve your position over the years with patience and diligence at work. Level 3. Average. The number that separates the upper half from the lower half overall is the median, and as for IQ, that number is 100. Average, including a deviation, however, includes anything from IQ 85 to 115. Obviously, there might be a slight difference between the lower and the upper end. The short version, if your IQ is average, you're good for the most part. Anything above is helpful depending on what you want to do. First of all, limitations of average IQ include a much lower probability of becoming a genius-level mathematician or physicist. Joining competitive careers is doable if you are conscientious and hardworking enough. Successfully joining and remaining at the most competitive positions will be difficult though. That's less due to your mental ability not being sufficient enough. It's rather due to your competitors outperforming you due to their even higher mental capacity. Well, you could argue you work harder than most, but unfortunately there are smarter people working even harder than you, regardless of your level. The chance of you actually being the smartest person who is also the hardest working person in a highly competitive domain is probably close to zero. From dead average to above average. Common jobs at these levels range from police officer, sales rep, and office clerk as dead average, all the way to bookkeeper, lab technician, accountant, or even programmer at the upper level of IQ 115. Talking about 115, this is probably the realistic range where consulting jobs at McKinsey fit in. Anything close to significantly above that, pushing 120, 130, and sometimes even more. Level 4. Above average to gifted. Professions here are mechanical, civil, or chemical engineering, scientists in general, as well as analysts and attorneys. The same goes for McKinsey positions and Goldman Sachs, with a tendency to the high end. Moving closer to the range of gifted people with an IQ starting at around 130, you will find more mathematicians and physicists. Other suitable at high IQ occupations include high-ranking managers and corporate executives, as well as scientific researchers. Senior positions at Goldman Sachs and McKinsey may be found here as well, even though I don't have specific data on that. Let's finally talk about you and the most competitive careers. Let's say you have an average IQ of 100 to 102 and you want to join McKinsey or Goldman Sachs, where the IQ average is very likely fairly high, certainly above 100. You did incredibly well in college, have done great internships and managed to somehow get hired by McKinsey, which is possible. Your IQ of 100 is enough to grasp what you need to do, and we assume you even understand the cases that you're being assigned to. The problem is the competition. As mentioned, in this league you are directly competing against top performers with IQs in the range of 125, 130 and beyond. The struggle for you will simply be the pace. In order to keep up with the rest of the team, you need to perform and deliver quickly. Intelligence is also speed. Assuming you join colleagues who are cognitively more capable than you, they process information much quicker and outperform you. They can solve complex problems quickly, a key trait of high IQ people. And given that your performance will be benchmarked against others and you fall behind subsequently, the performance evaluation that such companies do on a regular basis won't work out in your favor and you're out. Knowing these things can help you to better assess the right fit of being challenged but not overwhelmed by your work environment. This is so critical to find happiness in careers. Try to avoid being the dumbest or the smartest in a room for too long, and don't be so sure that you always want to join the highest performing environment, because that can be painful at times. Coming back to McKinsey, Goldman Sachs and the connection to prestigious universities such as Harvard. Access to elite networks and knowledge aside, the whole point of joining elite universities is the ability to surpass the entry barriers to get in. Forget about working for McKinsey or Goldman Sachs, because first of all you have to get the job, and that's a challenge in itself. Companies like McKinsey and Goldman Sachs are insanely competitive and can choose out of tens of thousands of applicants. So many people want to work there, and that's not so much about the money as you may think. The main motivation is the prestige that comes with having the label of McKinsey or Goldman Sachs to your name in your CV. It shows that you were good enough to join the best. The same goes for major law firms, by the way. And as a company, why would you not choose the brightest, hardest working graduates with the best grades if they are literally dying to work for you? The reason why Harvard, Stanford or Columbia graduates are popular hirings for those competitive positions is because they already have a track record of some sort of performance and excellence, backed up by the credibility of the top institution they went to. Plus, their abilities fit well into the job requirements of these firms: fast-paced problem solving and abstract thinking. These hirings are pre-filtered by the competitive academic path they have successfully completed. Manipulating abstract concepts and solving problems in certain domains are two things the IQ test captured. That's how to explain the correlation between highly competitive careers and high IQ scores. We are now approaching the next levels: gifted, genius, and above. Subscribe to see part 2 coming very soon.